Okay, I'm gonna get on camera again. Um, People have asked me what I'm writing now, and I'm writing about my grandmother and my mother, and um, that might not, be interesting to some. It's been really fun for me, just to see like where and why I ended up where I was, because a lot of people know that I wrote a memoir about my childhood, but like, how does one get to that place? And it's been really depressing, and I've cried a lot. My grandma had a really horrific life, and I'm actually more and more surprised that she continued to live. To be honest, like as I look at things, I'm like, oh, okay, because my grandma and I were really close. I was not her first grandchild, but I was the one that was mostly there for her for the majority of her life. And so I caught a lot of her stories, and I think she wanted her stories told, and I think she wants them told now too, which is why it's coming up so much. And it's been great work. I highly recommend writing as therapy if you can. But I've discovered a really funny thing, and that's what I wanted to talk about right now. That is cheering me up in such a horrible book and such a horrible life, and I thought I would just share it now because it's downright delightful to me compared to what I've been writing and researching and living. So before I knew anything, I knew Madonna, her music. My mom was so, to say she was a fan is an understatement, and so I didn't know anything, but I had Madonna's entire Immaculate collection, which is a cassette tape, probably released around 1990 or so, that had a huge bit of her catalog from the 1980s and 90s in it, like the beginning of 1990 in it. Probably like her greatest hits. But of course she had a career way past that. I don't know much about Madonna, so I'm going to make some pretty ignorant statements. But this is just somebody whose mom was obsessed with Madonna. And it was at such a young and crucial age that I listened to all this stuff, and my mom was a fantastic singer. Like, my siblings and I can't agree on almost anything, but we can all agree through our horrific childhoods that our mom was a very good singer. And she had a great voice. She didn't just have like a really beautiful voice that could hit certain notes. She was definitely a soprano, I think is what it's called. So of course, like what Madonna's catalog mostly features. But she also could project. She was she had a powerful voice. She was really, really capable of a lot. Her vocal range was good, and then she was able to project. So I think a lot of people think that I don't have anything positive to say about my mom, and that would be not entirely inaccurate, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, meth addict, But I do actually have some positive things about my mom, and I wanted to share something that makes me really happy today about my mom, and that is that it was at such a formative moment in my life, when forming memories, when I was terribly young, because I was born in 1988. Immaculate Collection came out on cassette tape in 1990, I'm pretty sure. And so it was in our car, in our house at all times. I know every single song on that album, whether it was appropriate for me or not to know about those songs and the content of those songs. I know all of them. I know all of them by heart, as much as a deaf girl can know, because there were a lot of lyrics that I was like, I don't know what she's saying. I literally thought that material girl was Cheerio girl. I'm a Cheerio girl because I was 4, you know, and I love Cheerios. I really was a Cheerio girl. But because those things were so formative and so impactful at a very crucial moment, I literally, to this day, still don't have a delineation between Madonna and my mom. My mom is Madonna. She is. She really is. And the only difference is, I guess Madonna had more money, you know? I don't know where that money went. So Madonna was moonlighting as my mom, and it was rough, you know? I could understand why she wanted to get away and maybe do like a world tour, you know, for Vogue or Like a Virgin. I get it, because it was not a fun life. You know, raising 5 children on your own, going through several divorces, it was rough. So my mom was Madonna. She was. She really was. She had an extensive amount of relationships, and so did Madonna. You know, I don't know much about her, but I mean, she dated quite a few people, so my mom had children by many different fathers. So did Madonna. But Madonna is cool and my mom is criticized, right? And to be totally honest, at some point, about when Madonna started releasing albums in the early 2000s that had hit singles on it like Music, I was kind of done with her. I was moving on. I had loved Mariah Carey for years. I was getting into Christina Aguilera. I was definitely favoring some different people. J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, like I was getting into that. And I was seeing new voices and new people, and I was impressed with them. So I wasn't as impressed with Madonna. She was starting to get creepy to me and kind of a has-been. And that's what my mom became to me too. It's very interesting. So anyway, when Madonna was moonlighting as my mom, she had multiple marriages and divorces, multiple relationships and breakups with amazing people from all different races and genders and stuff like that. She definitely had an erotica phase. She definitely had like a Justify My Love thing that I heard in the bedroom next door my entire childhood. And so after a while, Madonna became dark and creepy to me. Like when you're a little kid, you maybe can comprehend, you know, like Lucky Star, or even something like Papa Don't Preach, you know, or Borderline or something like that. I could handle that because I was a little kid. Obviously, I was gonna love things like Cherish and Material Girl, but I could handle a little bit of depth. Live to Tell was probably out of my depth, but I still felt like I could understand. So my mom was going through these relationships, and I saw how her music as Madonna reflected those relationships, like Live to Tell, saying a man can tell 1,000 lives. She was literally going through one of her divorces in front of me, and I was seeing how this man was tearing her apart in court and trying to take her children away and stuff. It was incredible because I could see this broad range with Madonna, where she was a material girl and she was Cherish with Merman, which was awesome because I loved The Little Mermaid, and my mom had red hair like The Little Mermaid. Forget that Madonna had blonde hair. My mom had Little Mermaid, you know, vibes, but she was also Madonna. But she would have these Cherish vibes when she would fall in love with some new guy, which was like literally every week. She literally almost had a partner every single week in some points in her life, because I heard it. I was right next door. And then she would have these deep, heartbreaking things like having to give up her baby for adoption, which was the next sibling after me. She had such a broad range of emotion and experience from her relationships and her choices. And so while I was a little kid thinking, wow, it's weird how, like, I'm trying to remember, I think it's like, there would be like Material Girl, and then there would be like Crazy For You, the next song on the album. And I would be like, holy cow, how is my mom like, I don't know, like Papa Don't Preach, she's deciding to keep the baby and have a family, and it's like super deep and loving and wonderful. But then at the same time, she's a material girl, and men are just like objects to use for like your betterment and getting what you want out of life and stuff. They're just steps to step on. And my mom was all of these things at once. She did stay in some relationships or use some people in relationships to like only for material gain. And then sometimes she would fall in love for love and have no money and stuff like that. And sometimes she gave up the baby. She considered abortion. She kept me. There was a lot there that she was going through, and obviously writing an amazing catalog, and just, my mom lived 1,000 lifetimes, I swear. Like she created such amazing songs that she sang for that, with all of that. So at least her lived experience was creating such an amazing catalog of art. And my mom dated from all different types of races and religions and backgrounds and stuff. She was friends with people who were gay, which at the time was like really controversial in Utah in the early 90s. And so just like Madonna dating Basquiat, king and queen of pop, like Michael Jackson, and her, like, she represented so much to me. She was always friends with people at work who were like from marginalized communities, like gay, or like gay people or people of color. All of her friends were like Esperanza, not Melissa or something. And so I just really, because it was like cemented together and stuck that way, my mom was Madonna. And even though I felt like Madonna became a has-been, and I felt like Madonna was way too sexual, and as she got into her like Justify My Love coffee table book that was really explicit and stuff, and I was a little kid and I didn't understand that, and it was a really scary world for me, and her voice got deeper as she progressed in her ability to sing. For me, it was a place that I didn't know and I was scared of and I didn't follow, just like my mom, with the extensive amount of partners and the deeper and darker and more horrible those partners got. She obviously experimented with drugs and got addicted to them, or else I wouldn't have gotten into foster care and all that. But it's just very interesting that, like, for Madonna and for other people, like her brother, my mother's brother died by suicide when he was about 27, 28. To me, that was Kurt Cobain. That was Kurt Cobain. I never met him because he died before I was born. But like, how is that different? Why is it okay for Madonna to do drugs and date a billion different people and get married and divorced and have children by different fathers, but then it's so wrong when my mom does it? And I realized that the only difference is money. Obviously, not everyone condoned Madonna's choices, but some of the things that she did have now, through the lens of time, been seen as like very brave, and pretty monumental and pretty forward thinking for her time. And she got a lot of flack for it. My mom also got a lot of flack for things. And what's interesting is, with time, I've realized that the thing that was wrong about my community ostracizing her and making her life worse was not necessarily like that it's wrong. She should not have had some of the behaviors that she did. So, sure, like, we probably, shouldn't enable someone to continue with their meth addiction if we can. But also, through the lens of time, some of what she went through and suffered makes a lot of sense, and the reactions of shame didn't help the situation and it made it worse, So, my mom, Madonna, did the same things that a lot of really famous actors, actresses, musicians do. They love the wrong people. They do things that shock people. They take drugs. They have children by different people. They don't always make the best decisions. Sometimes they break the law, and sometimes they get away with it more often than my mom did. And I wonder if my mom had been a little more loved and accepted and a little less judged, if things had turned out differently. And I'm not sure. Maybe she just wanted to do what she wanted to do, and she really didn't see a point to life, so why not just burn it up until it's gone? But my mom has taught me a lot of things, and I know that I don't talk very positively about her all the time. And it's hard too, because I was a child and terrified of her, and she physically beat me. She cut off my ponytail, she flipped me off, she spit at me while I was making dinner for my siblings. She made me beg around the neighborhood. She made me do whatever I had to do to make sure we were fed. She left me to care for my siblings at 9 years old. I don't know how else to say it, but there were a lot of awful things. She beat me with wooden spoons, with leather belts, with coat hangers, with her bare hand, whatever she could get her hands on, doesn't matter. She screamed, put holes in the walls. I watched her punch and shove partners. I watched her be beaten by partners. I've watched her perform sexual acts in front of me. Obviously not good things, right? But I have learned a lot. And one of the main things that I've learned is what not to do. And so a lot of my life, I'm trying to even out more now, but a lot of my life's choices were made as in opposition to the Madonna way of life. I chose to start going to church, and I'm not religious, but that's something I did when I was 15. I chose to not try drugs. I chose to never get even close to methamphetamine, never get close to cocaine, never do any of that stuff. Also, like I don't drink. I don't want anything to do with that. Because of my granny, I don't smoke either. All of them had diabetes, so I don't even eat refined sugar. And I haven't for about 3 years. My mom could never find time to exercise, and I understand, but I try to exercise. My mom wasn't a very attentive or loving parent most of the time, and there were a lot of reasons for that, but I tried to be a loving and attentive parent. My mom was probably metabolically pretty not sound. Like she drank at least 2 liters of Pepsi every single day, which resulted in diabetes and a lot of metabolic dysfunction and a lot of mental illness. So I try my best to take care of my body and be aware and not eat processed foods. But I realize that like I am privileged enough to have the internet, and she didn't have that. As great as she was as Madonna, as great of a singer as she was, and as wild and crazy as her life is, which a lot of people glorify in like books that they love to read, the reality is that being the child of someone that wild is not pleasant. It leads to abuse, and it's taken 37 years for me to try and heal from that. It probably would have been faster if I could have afforded therapy. Probably would have been faster if I'd had like a much more extensive loving family than I did. I had my granny, and that was it. So these choices might be glorified by some, and I can understand why some of these choices are made when someone is truly mentally ill. I have felt the depths of that, and I've been tempted to do all sorts of crazy things that I normally wouldn't consider because, life was meaningless, and so why does it matter? But the reality is that anyone on the receiving end of it can be really painful. So my middle way, learning from my mom and Madonna, because they're not the same person, but they are to me, is that we can make art of our pain. And hopefully we just don't create pain. Hopefully we don't become addicts. And hopefully we don't abuse children. A great way to express yourself is through maybe some shelter writing. Find a way to voice, to explore, and try to be conscious about it. I really wish that would have been possible for my mom, but I don't think it is. I don't even know if that idea was really around during that time. But if you are struggling, I think embrace it and make art out of it. That is what I'm trying to do as an unemployed writer right now. Having a hard time. I'm going back to the beginning, and it's been a really beautiful journey, and all I do is write and cry and write and cry when I finally sit down to do the work. And it's not easy, but it will make sure that I don't pass on the pain, and hopefully have a really, really funny story to show for it. I'm just kidding. It doesn't get funny for a long while. My book is really depressing so far. But Madonna has taught me to create art out of whatever weird path and journey you're on. And that includes my mother. My mother was quite a journey and quite a lesson for me. And it's not all bad. I mean, I wouldn't go through it again, and I would never wish this on anyone, but I'm trying to make it not as bad as it could be. That's all I want to say.